Hi, I'm Rebecca Bradley. This is the Virtual Crime Book Club. It is Monday, the 20th of June 2020, and we are discussing True Crime Story by Joseph Knox. Spoilers will be discussed, so if you haven't read the book and you are watching this as a recording, be aware you maybe want to stop and read the book first. Joseph is with us this evening. I have a brief bio from his website. Joseph was born and raised in and around Stoke and Manchester, where he worked in bars and bookshops before moving to London. He reads, writes, and runs compulsively. Not all at the same time, I hope, not hope.
It's slightly out of date. I've just moved back north. In January, I moved to Staffordshire, which is the small town where I grew up, basically. My partner and I had a little girl last year.
Oh, congratulations.
So, yeah, it's the best. But it was time to leave London, definitely. So yeah, we're adjusting to small town life now, which is very nice with the baby.
Yes. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Thank you for taking the time out today anyway, then, with the family life and working and what have you. So yeah, thank you. We do, as you can imagine, have lots of questions about true crime stories, so we will get on and ask them. True crime story is unique in the way that you've placed yourself in it. Where did that idea come from? I did warn you this one was coming.
Yeah, this is it's a question with many answers. There, in the original version of the book, Joseph Knox was not in there, and I think there are a few different reasons that I say he, because I hope it's obvious I'm not exactly the same as Joseph Knox in the book, who is a bit of a scumbag, I think it's fair to say. But essentially, when I got to the end of the book, it just felt like something was missing. My kind of thesis in writing it was, I've seen a lot of reviews that talk about unlikable characters, which is something I don't really believe in. I like all my characters, and I'm looking for the humanity in them. I think they might have made terrible mistakes, but I think part of the book, because part of what I have gleaned from the genre of true crime, is that not many lives look unblemished when the microscope is over them, I suppose. In so many true crime documentaries, true crime books, they will begin to look at, say, the friends and family of someone who has gone missing, and it seems like everyone has a dark secret. And, I think that is a truth about life. And I don't mean that everyone out there has killed someone or anything like that, but there are things in your life that you don't necessarily want to broadcast to the world, and things perhaps that you're not terribly proud of as well. And so that's really what I was looking for in all of these characters. But the Joseph Knox character really, I thought, needed to come in and underline the theme of the book, which for me overwhelmingly is kind of men taking advantage of women. And so it seemed like I was in this situation where I knew Evelyn perhaps would not get to the end of the book. So I knew that she must have sent this document to someone else. Another problem I had with the book was that I wanted it to look like a true crime book. I wanted people to be able to buy it and read it with everything in it being convincing, essentially. In fact, in the paperback, in this, if you look at the kind of legal stuff at the beginning, you'll see that the photos are all attributed to characters in the book. because I wanted people to get to the end and go, wait a second, this can't be real, and look back and go, wait, no. And so I've messed with a lot of people's heads like that. But my problem was my name was going to be on the cover of the book, and clearly I was not the writer. So it seemed like a great opportunity to kind of underline the theme of men taking advantage of women by having Joe Knox steal the book, essentially, from a woman. And so that just seemed like a really a great answer, because it also explained why my name would be on the cover of this book, which we learn at the beginning I didn't write. In the world of the book, of course, you know. So there were several reasons, and then I think the main one really is that in my mind, the character I most empathize with and kind of feel closest to is Evelyn. And I think maybe because she is a struggling writer, she's had some setbacks, she has had some health problems, she's dealing with a perception of failure, at least, that she is putting on herself. That was how I felt when I was writing the book, and I think I felt like it was a bit too obviously me, and so I thought if I put in this kind of swaggering idiot and said, you know, this is Joseph Knox, that would kind of hide that from everybody. So, but that is the kind of thing you only learn months after the book has come out. You kind of go, oh, that's what I was running from there. That's why I did that, because I was trying to not let people see this kind of vulnerable side of me. So I've hidden behind a few different characters there, and I think all the characters are, God help me, you know, fractured parts of my psyche. So yeah, the final point to make on the Joseph Knox thing is Joseph Knox is not my real name, and so I felt a little bit like Joseph Knox was the first character I invented, in a way, because it's a pen name, and I've always felt this kind of tension. Particularly because I'm sure most people won't have seen my first 3 books, and you don't need to have, but they're very dark. And then I would go and do events, and people kind of expected this miserable, sullen, grumpy, broken man, where in life I'm kind of a giggling idiot. And so the final part of that was that I wanted to laugh at Joseph Knox. You know, I wanted to say, this isn't someone to take seriously. You know, don't buy into any kind of idea that I'm some dark guy. I'm a fool, you know. And so there were so many different things I wanted to accomplish with having Joseph Knox in there, but only some of them became apparent to me. Some of them only became apparent to me after I'd finished the book.
Yeah, you called Joseph Knox a scumbag when you first started talking about that. So you put yourself in a negative light with the publisher's note right at the start. Were you worried about this, that some readers might take it literally?
I really wasn't, but only because I didn't think about it. Because when anyone is writing their book, you are just looking for the answer. You're just desperate to get there. And when I had that idea, to me, I just thought, oh, that is perfect. It solves all these problems. It's fun. It's kind of a bit cheeky, maybe, in a way. It's also a bit nervy. You know, I know some people are going to hate me for doing it, or not hate me, but dislike the book for doing it. But I just kind of plunged in. I think now I see there have probably been some consequences. I think it seems like most crime festivals in the UK kind of read that page, closed the book, and put it to one side. because I have not been invited anywhere for like I think 2 years really. So I think I am going to Harrogate actually in the summer. But yeah, until then it's been very quiet, and I wonder if the book tricked some people who maybe were just looking at 20 different books quickly, you know. But I have also had quite a lot of disappointed emails from people for my conduct in the book, particularly Americans, because it came out in America this year. They believe really wholeheartedly that I'm the worst. And I, in fact, had a conversation with a man on Twitter last week or the week before who said, you know, I just am so disappointed in you. I find it very hard to believe your explanations of everything. And I said, the book is fiction. And he replied saying, that's what you would say. You know, he just completely believed. So when I get an email now from someone who says you're a scumbag, I agree with them, and I respond in character.
Do you?
As Joseph Knox, and say, well, you weren't there, you don't know, you know, it was very complicated, I'm very sorry. Not to be mean, but because it's also awkward to tell someone that they're wrong. And I just kind of hope that you know, the penny will drop and they will see that as a kind thing rather than a mean thing. You know, it's not to take the mick out of people, it's to keep the fiction alive. Yeah.
But you've actually answered my next question, which was, have you had any unusual responses to the book via social media or email? And obviously you have. They have actually taken the publisher's note was saying this author this is real.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I don't regret it at all. It was the right thing for the book, and the book is more important than me, and it's more important than my career. It's more important than any, you know, I'm not saying in the world, but to me, I have to believe in the book, and that was the way I could make myself believe in it, I suppose.
But to readers, it's a bit like killing the dog, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're horrified by it.
Yeah, and as well, I think if you do open it and you see a publisher's note saying the guy whose name is on the cover of this book is essentially cancelled, you know, that is the kind of message it is, isn't it? It's that he's done something wrong and he needs to go away. I imagine a lot of people have opened the book and kind of gone, I'll read Lee Child instead, you know, and, you know, I don't blame him.
It's an unusual start to a book, yeah.
I just thought it would be attention grabbing, I think. And it's, again, in the world of the book, it seemed like that's the way it would start.
I presume you've had positive feedback as well as the unusual.
Yes. Yes. But you know, as well, the unusual or even the negative, you know, and it's perfectly okay for anyone to dislike the book, of course, and especially because it's taking all these chances and trying to do all these things that may or may not succeed. I don't know. I kind of think that the mark of certainly the book I want to write is one that divides people a little bit. I don't want to really, I just think it's a dangerous game to try and make everyone happy, potentially, you know, and maybe then you are writing kind of cookie cutter stuff. And I think to some extent, although they're not, I did feel a little bit that way about my first 3 books. And so part of the challenge of this one to myself was, okay, how far can we push the envelope, you know?
Yeah. True crime story is very different to the Aidan Watts books, because I did read Sirens. some authors are unable to read while writing. I consume a lot of books while writing. Are you a big reader? Actually, I've read your bio. Yeah, you are. What do you like to immerse yourself in?
So I'm a huge reader. I was a bookseller at Waterstones for 10 years, which is still the best job I've had. I preferred it to writing because there was much more reading involved. And I got everything early, essentially. It was the best. And so everything new immediately. So for those 10 years, I felt so keyed in to everything that was current and coming out. And I really did have my finger on the pulse. And then when did I leave Waterstones? Two or three years ago. And ever since then, I certainly am not as on the pulse as I was, but I'm always surrounded by books. I mean, it's just a handful of what is here, of various different things. You know, I have the first novella of Dennis Johnson, who is a very revered American writer, is now dead. But this is a sort of experimental novel where it's short stories connected together. You're not sure who the narrator is. I've got one about a cold caller who goes mad in the 80s in New York and becomes a killer. Got some short stories here from, sadly, I think a young American writer who took his own life when he was, I think, 24 or something, terribly young. Oh man, all kinds of things. I could waste your whole evening with this. This is a very lovely book called But Beautiful, which is about jazz, but it's really short stories about Black men living in very impoverished circumstances, really. And so it's, you know, it's a wonderful thing. This is something I haven't started yet, but is about Los Angeles. It's called Always Crashing in the Same Car. Because I write noir fiction, I grew up reading all these LA thrillers. And for some reason, it is just in my blood now. I'm kind of obsessed with the place, although I've only been there once. And then I've got a final thing I can say is Room at the Top, which is, when is this book from? It's very old. I read it years and years ago, 1957. I didn't read it then, but it's about a working class guy who goes to work in a factory and essentially betrays the woman he loves to rise in social circles. And that is similar to something I'm trying to write at the moment. So that is kind of always good to keep to hand as well.
So you don't find it puts you off writing?
It doesn't put me off, but particularly at the moment where I'm really aiming to have my new book finished in the next 5 weeks. And so probably in these next 5 weeks, I mean, you can probably already see death in my eyes because I'm not sleeping much at the moment, but for those next few weeks, probably there will not be much reading, but I start to go mad if I don't do any at all. So I will definitely be cramming in, half an hour at least a day. And I've got, God, I can't go on about it even more. I've got even more books over here that I'm actually reading right now as well. So yes, it doesn't distract me. It's fuel. The only problem is time.
Definitely, yeah.
And particularly like as you're barreling towards a deadline, you everything falls away.
Yeah.
Especially your hair.
Yeah. It was an ensemble cast, true crime story. Who was your favourite character to write and why?
Definitely Andrew Flowers, because he's a git, and it's always fun to write a git.
Actors say the same thing. They like playing not the good guy, but somebody different.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's an opportunity to say and do things you would never say and do in real life, you know, but also to hopefully kind of critique that behavior as well, you know.
Oh, it's frozen. Is it frozen for everybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, hopefully it comes back again. I don't know how to give him a nudge. I don't think I can. I think it must be his.
And fun because he was funny, I think. Yeah.
You just completely froze for about a minute.
Oh. I'll Andrew was fun to write because he was funny, I think. And that was one of the fun things, that even though he was kind of a scumbag and not, well, I don't know, he's a young idiot, isn't he? And he's wealthy. And that was another fun thing to write about. I am from a working class background, and so I have a permanent chip on my shoulder about wealth, and would love to get it off, because it's you know, it's not good to hate rich people, of course, you know. And so a part of me, I think, was trying to write out some of my class anxiety with him. All the characters really are solving a different problem of mine. You know, Kim is kind of talking about imposter syndrome, isn't she? You know, because she's the quote unquote less attractive twin. Obviously, she was the much more interesting one to me, which is why she's the main character of the book. But, you know, she feels like an imposter. Which is how I felt when I was writing the book. And, you know, then you have Jai, who is this kind of guy who is drinking and drugging his life away, which I didn't feel like when I was writing the book, but I certainly had a brush with when I was a younger man. And then, of course, Andrew is this class anxiety. Zoe, who is kind of absent through the book, I think is like, before starting True Crime Story, I spent 6 months writing a different book, which would have been my fourth novel. But when I delivered it to my publisher, they were like, "Whoa, this is terrible." And they were right. It was bad. And it was also very bleak, and it was just going nowhere. But it was a terrible knockback, and
it's hard to hear.
Yeah, awful. And like time down the drain is always how it feels. Although I don't think that is the case. I think you learn something. I think I wouldn't have written True Crime Story if I hadn't written that book first. But going into True Crime Story, I did feel a bit like, oh God, maybe whatever I had for those first three books has gone. You know, maybe it has vanished. And I think Zoe is kind of that to me a little bit. She's like a metaphor for inspiration, or for, you know, I don't want to say talent, but like an urge to create, I suppose, something like that. You know, and I could go on and on, you know, her parents kind of pushing her about fame. Well, my parents never pushed me about fame, but again, kind of going back to that working class thing, and especially going into a thing like publishing, where it seems like everyone went to Oxford or Cambridge or something like that, and particularly in the industry itself, you worry about that stuff, you know, more perhaps than you should. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to succeed or keep going or push on, you know, at times, possibly when I should have stopped. I think writing my third book, I probably should have not done it to some extent, because it was just a bad experience, and I pushed through it but I could not write for a year after, and I had headaches for like 6 months after. It was just one of those books you write where just everything goes wrong, and I kind of fought, and I out, but you can really burn yourself out doing this, and that is what I did. And so much of this book and so many of the characters, there is of course the story that is going on, and there are the themes underneath the story, of course, which are, you know, this culture of men using women, but as well our kind of salacious obsession with missing young women, and particularly blonde missing young women. And, you know, even that was actually trying to address something of my own past, which is there is a criticism kind of thrown at crime novels, and particularly male crime novelists, which is that it's very easy to kill 10 women in a book and have a bestseller, you know. Well, not easy, but and I have certainly had female characters who've gone through terrible situations in my books. Is that exploitive? I don't know. Sorry, my internet is saying unstable. I hope you can hear me.
You just keep clicking out a little bit, but we can get most of what you're saying.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yes, I prattling on too much there. Anyway.
No, it's been really interesting, especially the last points about how crime novels are viewed. Definitely. I'll move us on quickly now, because we're obviously taking up a lot of time for you. Onto the writing process. Are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you plan your novel out or just sit down and type it?
I sit down and go. Every time I tell myself I won't do that, and I try so hard not to. And this one I really thought I wouldn't do that, but I can't do it. I need to know what the characters are doing on the page, how the words look, how it feels, before I can decide what happens next somehow. When I try and plan, the results for me are artificial, but it's just because my brain does not work that way. You know, I cannot envisage it in that way. I have to feel my way through it. Yeah.
But all those characters, how did you keep track of them all?
Oh, madness. Just madness. Because of the book that was rejected, suddenly was in a situation where I had to be on the way and was running out of money and had 4 months to come up with something. And so the idea for True Crime Story I had 10 when I was reading a book that was kind of similarly laid out, but it was a non-fiction book. It wasn't a novel. But reading it, I just thought, wow, this would be a great way to write a novel, because you could have all these people disagreeing with each other. You could have them remembering things differently. You can have people, you know, we all look better in our memories than perhaps we were in reality. And we have self-serving memories. We also might remember something differently to protect someone else. And so people have all these different motives, some of them unconscious, when they are retelling a story. And you know, and then there's just the fallibility of memory anyway. And so it just struck me as such an interesting way to try and write a novel. But at the time I was just nowhere near good enough to do it. I had to write the other 3 books first to kind of learn how you build a character. And even then it was way too ambitious for me. But that is always the idea you want. I think you want something that is just out of reach and not enough time. and that tends to focus the mind. And so with true crime story, because I did not have time, I just was on it every minute of the day, for those 4 months, you know, and there was no problem with me remembering who was where when, because I was just in it so much. Now, for all that, and the fact that I said I sit down and go, I do a lot of editing. So I really I print out and I go through it with a red pen, and it's a bloodbath of red ink when I'm finished. And then I type all that up, I print it again, and I keep going through it until there is no red ink on the thing. And you know, once it's substantially gone, I obviously go digital to save paper. But but it really is important for me, that printout stage, because it just makes it feel real, and it allows me to really sink into it, I think.
Yeah. People that can sit down and write with no outline just terrify me.
but it's just slow. I think it's just slower, and you have to repair it afterwards. You know? I'm determined to become a plotter. Determined.
Yeah, it's I wrote my first one without an outline, and then I thought, no, never again.
Yeah. Right. I should have learned that lesson, because my first book took me 8 years to write.
Yes.
It probably should have taken 6 months.
Yes, definitely. The same here. We've got 2 more questions, one from 2 members, 1 question each. Marina, do you want to ask yours?
Yeah, so I was also struck by the very strong sense of atmosphere in the book, and was somewhat surprised to discover that tower block actually exists as University of Manchester accommodation, and I think it's been pulled down or something in the meantime. So I was wondering if you had actually any experience of it yourself, or did you research it?
Can I just say something? I wanted to ask that question as well, and whether the roof space did exist, and if you had any ex-students from Owens Park get in contact with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did not go to Manchester Uni, but I dated a girl who went there. So that is my experience of Owens Park, really, that I would visit her there. The tower, I've only been in once at a party, which is, and a party, I should say, when I was 18 years old. So a long time ago. And mainly the tower, to answer the question about atmosphere, it was because in the first draft there was none. It was terrible. It was just so loose and everyone was all over the place. And so I thought, well, how can I focus this, and how can I bring in some kind of geographical scares and terror, and how can I lock everyone in together? And then I remembered the tower, and it was as simple as that. And as soon as I put them in there, again, it just answered so many questions. Suddenly there was this, the flat was different. They were in a high rise. There was the potential of people coming and going more, and it just seemed to work. The roof, I don't think exists, but or certainly I don't know that it does. That is just me going for it. But I'm hoping, I don't think the tower actually has been pulled down yet. It's always there's a news story every year saying it's coming down, and every year there's a protest, and every year it hangs on another 12 months. And so I was really hoping that it would be pulled down before the book came out, so no one could go and check. So fingers crossed for me, they are going to detonate the tower any day now, and I will get away with murder.
Thank you. And we have Ellen for the last question.
You may have already explained it. I was wondering when you decided who was going to be the actual murderer. And apparently, did you know before, or when did you know? And when did you know it was going to be a complex identity solution?
It's a very good question, and it's a mysterious answer, because I don't think I really knew when I wrote that first chapter where everyone has gone to the nightclub and Kimberly is taken from outside the nightclub. She has that terrible experience. I certainly don't think I knew then. I think at that point I was very much in the, oh God, let's do this thing, get it moving phase. But with that said, the revelation of Finton mirrors something that did, and the guy was slightly different, but not dissimilar, essentially. And when was it? Like, I think 18 months ago, I had an email out of the blue from this person who I'd known very casually when I was a teenager and had met once or twice at a party. And I knew afterwards that he had gone on to seriously hurt a friend of mine. And I got this email from him all these years later, having not seen or heard of him since, saying that he liked my books. And I thought, well, let's see how much you like this one, because I think he will probably recognize parts of himself in there. It's one more meaning to the true crime story title. So I don't think I went into it 100% like that's who it will be and how. Yet again, it's one of those things where 6 months after the book, you go, oh God, that's what that was all about. You know, you kind of only find out afterwards sometimes. So it happened naturally, but it's also a slight middle finger to someone who was mean to someone who was a friend of mine, essentially. And I think he will, if he ever reads the book, he will know that that's what it is. And it's a message saying, don't read any more of my books, basically.
Thank you for that. What can readers expect from you next, Joseph?
Oh man, it's the working title is called Lover Boy. We'll see if I can get that past the publisher. I think it's going to be a fight, but I think it's a good title, and it's about a working class. I say con man, but he's just pulled his first scam, and he's a guy who has kind of not had much luck in life and has just ripped off a call center where he worked, and he flees the north and goes to London, but he's basically penniless. And when he arrives, he discovers that he is the spitting image of the missing son from a wealthy family. And so the rest of the book is him essentially trying to con his way into that family and pretend that he is their missing son, essentially. But in doing so, discovers much darker stuff than even what he is doing. So, I'm really hoping I'm going to get it done in time to come out next year. But please cross your fingers for me.
And where can readers find you online?
I am on Twitter and Instagram. I think on Twitter I've got an annoying name like Joseph Knox with 2 dashes afterwards. I don't know who the real Joseph Knox is, but he got there before me. So I couldn't get that name. And then on Instagram, I'm called Knob, which is like knobs with a lisp. I don't know why. Obviously I set up that account, years ago as an idiot, not a published writer. And so if you scroll all the way back, you can find lots of pictures of me kind of just being an idiot. And then it suddenly becomes, black and white pictures of me trying to look serious.
Well, thank you for taking double the amount of time that I told you it would take out of your evening. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. And I'm really sorry it's taken so long, but
Not
we
at all.
really enjoyed chatting to you.
Thank you for having me. And it's always a pleasure to talk to readers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Joseph.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, Joseph was lovely.
Mm-hmm.
He said when I emailed him, he said, "Oh, I can whittle on for 20 minutes about the book." And I said, he warned me. So, but he was lovely. So we're already at the time where we would usually be logging off. Is everybody all right for time for another 20 minutes or so?
Yeah.
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 Okay. So, did you enjoy True Crime Story?
Yeah.
Yes. In parts. Lorna's always the harshest critic.
I know.
Hey.
I'm going to say that this time it was probably just because of my age. I really had a limited interest in the activities of 20-somethings. So no, I found it very slow to get going. Then I got into it, and then I thought it's taking a long time to end. So I didn't dislike it. I just found it very I think maybe how it was written, I found quite disjointed. So it didn't flow as though it didn't become a page turner.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a quick question before I ask the usual questions? I generally always read by audiobook because I struggle with a lot of, my neck gives me trouble and it gives me a lot of headaches and migraines. So I find reading visually hard. So I read by audiobook a lot. Is there anybody else reads by audiobook, or do you all generally read visually?
Both.
I do both.
I've never listened to an audiobook ever.
Yeah, audiobook and Kindle, I have to say.
I was reading this one, and then I changed to audio because I wasn't getting into it at all, reading it.
I don't like audio at all. I always read.
Right. Yeah, I think some people can't. I tried to get my mum into it and she couldn't. The chapters on there, I don't know if it was different on the book, but the characters, there was a different voice actor for the characters. But it didn't tell you when they were changing them. Did it tell you in the book?
Yeah.
Yes.
They didn't tell you when they were changing actors. They just spoke.
It's been hard.
And I found that quite difficult on the audio.
Now, in the book, it was clear who was speaking, but at the beginning, for me, it was a bit difficult to get into the book because it was quite short. So we were always jumping from one character to the other. And at the beginning, because, I didn't know the characters and I didn't really understand what was going on. So it was a bit hard to get into the book. I think at the beginning, each character should be given a bit more space.
it should be a bit lengthier, each part, at least at the beginning, so we could understand a bit more about the characters. Because for me, it was a bit hard to get into the book, the first part, maybe. I started enjoying it, like maybe from the second or third part. So I enjoyed, like, at least the second half was really good. The first one was a bit difficult to get into, but I found it quite original, and I actually like it. But at the beginning, I thought it was a bit difficult to follow and understand the characters. But
I agree with that. Yeah, I think the same there. I think that's right. There's something, you know, you were trying to figure out who was what and doing what, and they were changing so quickly. But after a while, you know, it just takes a little while to groove into it, and it got better. Yeah.
The way I thought of it is like you get in some of those documentaries. So again, it's kind of like a true crime documentary or something. It was imitating that on TV, where you would have the various talking heads, and you'd always have their name and whatever, this is the police guy, or this is the whatever, the friend, or, you know, underneath, so you would know who's who, but they would be talking about a theme. So that's how I interpreted it. You know, you ask them the same question, then you say, so what about that evening? And then they're almost like little snippets where they just come in, even with just a few sentences. I mean, it wasn't quite like that in the book, but that's what it would have been like in a documentary. So I think that's what that effect was, what he was trying to achieve. But it's much harder to do in a book format. Yeah.
I had to keep interesting to do it that way, though. You know, it's just, as you say, it's just trying to get yourself into it to understand what's going on and feel comfortable going through all the characters.
I fell into his trap in as much as when I was reading it, I thought it was a non-fiction book, and it took me about a third of the way through before I realised that it was completely fiction. But I was absolutely fascinated with the style of writing. I've never read a book in that way, and it was so cleverly done, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked the characters. I could empathise with the father. Well, no, empathise is the wrong word. I could associate with the father. I thought that was an interesting character, and the interrelation between the various students, I think that came out very well. And although, like some of your other members, I'm a long distance in age-wise, but I really did enjoy it. It was a fascinating book, and I'm really glad I got the attention to it. And the author has come across this morning, this evening, completely different to the way I visited him. Such a nice fellow. You know,
you expected him like the character in the book.
I did indeed, but I thought he was absolutely fantastic. I love the book. You really did. Very, very different.
I did. I landed up, actually, I nearly went to the RNCM, but then went to university to study music. And when he was talking about this Professor Michael Anderson, and I grew up in Manchester, and so I know Owens Park and all that. And I found myself, I was Googling who was Professor Michael Anderson, would I have met him, and so on. And then it suddenly dawned on me, my husband said, I said, you've got to read this, you know. And it must have, even though I knew it was fiction to start off with, the way it was written, with the way it was, the pages were all sort of shadowed from the emails as though they'd been photocopied, and the little footnotes when it said Joseph Knox did this in an interview and so on. I was completely sucked in, like you, Norman. I really was, to believing it was true. And then it was only towards the end I thought, phew, it's not, because I couldn't find anything about this kidnapping with Kimberly or anything. I thought, I'm going mad. And then I thought, of course, it's fiction. I thought it was excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I agree towards the end. And I wasn't quite sure about the murderer either. It just seemed a bit far-fetched for me just at that time. I'd no feeling of it coming on, but I thoroughly enjoyed the book.
I mean, I enjoyed the book, and I knew that it, you know, it was fiction. But even at the end, I did do a Google search just to make sure that it wasn't real. And I guessed it was Finton, but not for the reason, you know, I had no idea that it was a dual personality. I just thought it was likely to be a man, and he seemed to be more likely liar than Kimberly, so that's why I just thought it might be him. But yeah, I really enjoyed it as well.
I mean, I would have said that I was actually more interested in that family dynamics. I thought that would have been an amazing book just on its own. You know, I mean, there was such a dysfunctional family. You could have had the whole novel just about them.
I do like top endings though when you know what happens. So, you know, you're not 100% sure what happened to Zoe, assume that she was murdered, and that, I suppose that's a slightly unrealistic bit. You know, if she was murdered, how was she murdered? Couldn't have dragged her through that attic, I don't think. It sounded very narrow, but that's only just kind of a small thing. Apart from that, I thought it was good.
But I think that's probably the point, because if it was something real, like one of these docu-series, you would never be sure of what happened. So I think it was just to add to the thing, like, okay, this is a real mystery. You find the killer, but you don't actually know how he did it, how he disposed of the body, and all of this. So I thought this was really interesting. I actually Googled the book. When I saw the editor's note, I was like, it's very strange, because I thought it was a true crime book. But then I was like, this is super strange. So I'm going to Google it. So I Googled it at the beginning, but I thought it was a real crime before I read it.
It really didn't surprise me that he's had some unusual interactions from readers with that publisher's note at the beginning.
But you see, that's
a picture of himself, and I was involved with this girl that committed suicide, and all these emails. They have all these redacted parts, so I'm not having an affair, but
yeah, this is exactly what I loved. I loved the fact that it was so sort of playing around. It's very experimental fiction, and yet within a genre format. And I just love that, because usually, you know, it is true that sometimes with some crime fiction, especially some that I've been reading recently, they do seem to just be copy and paste. It's all the same thing. And so this one just, you know, played around with it, was having fun with the genre, and, you know, you didn't know what to expect. And I just loved all the little dropping of hints of the unreliability of the Joseph Knox in the book, and, you know, the relationship between him and the person who was actually doing the investigating. I really enjoyed that.
So it was an unusual way of telling a story, the format. Do you think it added to the story?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I do.
It made it a lot more dynamic. I thought the story was a lot more, as Marina was saying, I had this image all through the book of interviews after interviews, people being interviewed all the time. I couldn't get away from that picture of watching a program on TV, report from news journalists who made some research of their own on a case, and they came up with all these witnesses, and so it was very lively in my head. Although I did read the book in 2 bits because I had work and I had to give up, and I forgot that Joseph Knox was actually the author, so completely forgot that part, and then yes.
What did you think about his decision to include himself in it, blurring the lines between fiction and non-fiction? Because several of you have said you turned to Google to check out facts as if they were facts.
I thought that was absolutely brilliant. It really was. It was so different to anything else that you read. It really made it quite unique. I thought that was brilliant ideas to do that.
I mean,
it was quite brave of him to get himself involved in the book, and I think it was a quite brave thing.
I mean, we've actually read before, haven't we, the YA book, where it was, you know, with emails and maps and, you know, so in other formats. And then I'm thinking The Appeal, the one that was recently, Janice Hallett, was it, which was also like that. So it's not the fact that it's in you know, interviews, or there is the one with a podcast series, like the 6 Stories series,
Yes.
right, which is different.
Matt Wesolowski.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not. So there are other examples of the story kind of being told as if it's real, and you get to see different fragments and you have to make up your own mind. But I think the fact that he put himself in it, and that's what kind of made this different, and it just became so messing around with your mind that I loved that. Yeah.
Yes, I thought that was very cheeky of him, really.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, he took some risks on whether readers would, especially because he put himself in a negative light and not a positive light, because you would think if an author is going to put themselves in a book, they would make it in a positive way. But he didn't. He did it in a negative.
I think the negative was really just to play with the book. Really, it wasn't serious. I read it as not being serious. Eventually, I mean, it took me a while to realize an author would never put themselves like that, show themselves like that, or anybody. If they have to show themselves, they probably put a lot more positive points about themselves. So I thought, for me, that's why I'm saying it was very cheeky of him, because he was actually playing with the reader.
Definitely. Yeah, chatting to him, he was lovely.
Yeah.
Do you feel the book is a celebration or a satire of our obsession with true crime accounts?
I think it's a satire. Personally, I don't like true crimes. Personally, I never read anything about real crimes. They scare me, that people can do things like that. So I read fiction hoping that it will stay fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that totally.
Well, I do, because I'm ex-police, so it just reminds me of the job, true crime. So I can't read it, but fiction is different for some reason.
Well, there's redemption in fiction, isn't there?
Yes.
And in true crime, there so often isn't. But I think, and he pointed that out too. I think he did a good job of
21 hours.
Satire of the the obsession that people have with the pretty blonde girl has gone missing, and let's all report on that, and everybody becoming obsessed with that, and so on. And in the meantime, there could have been, I don't know how many other girls or boys or whatever who did not have that photogenic appearance gone missing, and nobody would have cared, or were from a lesser class or whatever.
It's unfortunate that we are completely led by this marketing, really. The people who sell better,
media, frenzy,
are the ones that we see more.
Yeah, that is true. It was a big cast of characters, as I said to Joseph. And how did he keep track of? I asked him how he kept track of them. Did you as readers find it easy to keep track of them?
I had to take notes.
More or less. You often have to skip back to see the name, to see which character especially I think when later on, when you got this the TV person in, I got them and the detective mixed up a couple of times. And you were having to go back and just check who is actually saying this.
I didn't find it a problem, because they all appear so frequently and intermix with each other. So it was quite easy, I felt, to follow and remember who the characters were because of their repetitions throughout the book.
I had a bit of a problem because he introduces them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And just noting their relationships to each other, who was roommates with whom, But even I didn't pick up on the ending, and I was surprised at the ending. Usually those kind of endings I don't like, but for some reason I felt it really worked in this book. Maybe because even though I kept track of who was who of the roommates, etc., I missed it completely. And so I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Did you have a favorite character out of the ensemble cast?
Evelyn, the
writer
who wrote the first story. Yeah,
I like Kimberly, the twin sister. I actually enjoyed the ending. I usually guess, but I didn't actually guess. I was surprised, but at the same time, it was credible, because at the end, this guy, he wasn't a friend of Zoe. He just was stalking her, and then during the investigation, he pretended to be a friend. So I think it was actually quite well done. So I liked it.
It is a bit scary, though, that it is the possibility that some people do these things, that they are not part of a friendship group, and they pretend to be to those outside who don't know, and it's very easy to just do that and inseminate yourself in somebody's life.
I mean, it's a little bit about identity as well, and it sounds like his next book is, featuring identity as well. This chap who's going to pretend to be the son.
But because I think it is quite true that it's how somebody can, after your death or disappearance or something, somebody can appropriate you and pretend that they have known you far better, or and that happens all the time with celebrities, right? All of suddenly everybody was their best friend and had all of their, and of course she had become a celebrity by virtue of disappearing. So I think that's quite easy nowadays, because we're sort of more apart, and it's all on social media, so they have a lot of details about you on social media, and can put up a more credible front. So I thought it was addressing quite a lot of things that are going on nowadays in a very entertaining way.
And although I think it does focus a lot on student life, which for some people obviously is a bit of a mystery, because I thought it portrayed them really well. The airheads, you meet amongst in groups of youngsters, and the others are more concerned and the others are indifferent. I felt that it was very much showing the culture we live in nowadays, where people are mostly seen on media, on social media. They share themselves, and it's obviously a generation difference. We didn't have that. I didn't when I was a child, but my daughters are now completely into it, and one is only 15, the other one is 25, 21, and they're already all over the internet.
I have to admit that after reading it, I finished it quite late at night, and I sent a message, a WhatsApp message to my son at university. It's like, so what have you been up to?
Yes.
It was a bit scary.
Was everybody happy with how the way the killer was revealed, or did you feel cheated?
I actually liked the way it was done. Why not?
I think it was okay, but I mean, it's slightly unrealistic, hopefully, that she wouldn't have gone round to his flat to, approach him to see if he was the killer.
Yeah, that bit of it is, don't go into the cellar all by yourself with no torch.
Did she know he was the killer? Because she thought it was Connor, and she did not know that Connor was the same guy as Finton.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So she had this timesheet. I don't remember that well. I finished this already some weeks ago. But then she thought Connor will be involved, so she went to Finton and talked with him. I don't think she thought it was him at that point. Maybe she was suspicious, but she wasn't sure.
She definitely said something that got him really riled.
So were you satisfied with the ending?
Yeah, I think so.
And who would read one of Joseph's next books?
Well, I haven't read any, so I probably would try some others.
So are we saying this is a positive month for this month's read?
I think so.
Yeah.
Apart from Lorna.
Like I said, I
the
didn't
corner there.
dislike it. It was just,
It's too young for you, Lorna.
Yeah, probably.
It's very much, I felt the book was very much geared at people who are into social media a lot and
Yes, I think
university
that
life.
was it. And that, I'm of, although I use technology and such, like I'm not into using loads of social media, and I still find that a bit strange that people do open up themselves to much in social media, and it's just very difficult to identify with.
But look at us all. We're using this.
Yeah, but you don't know much about me.
No,
what I think about some books, but that's about it.
Can I just say, completely unrelated, but sort of, I've just read that there is a German crime thriller that has just come out in German that is called The Zoom Killer, where they are on a Zoom call and they see somebody being killed. Of course, they don't see the killer because of, I don't know, virtual background or whatever. So yeah, and I thought, and then it starts happening again, and it's like, oh, who's? So I thought that was such a clever idea.
That book had to happen.
Yeah.
Before I switch the recording off, does anybody want to say anything else about True Crime Story?
No, I would recommend it just for the novelties way it was written.
Yeah. So it's a good month for True Crime Story this month from the book club.
Yeah.
Okay.